The wacky world of MultimediaJay.
Do 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 do. I think we all knew that I was eventually going to do that, and do that right. By the way, if you watch 2001: A Space Odyssey, I highly recommend the Blu-ray version. So I seemed to run out of energy when I finished building this thing last go-around. The end of the video was kind of boring, and that's because I really was getting exhausted. But I was absolutely determined to have this thing working on day one, and I went a little overboard. I know this because Haste Makes Waste came back and owned my ass later on, because the next day everything stopped working. What happened was, the rat's nest of cabling that I had from not using the cable management, in this case, adequately, that I paid for, came back to bite me because I had a case where drives would come unplugged if I simply moved it around because of the terrible wiring. That has been fixed. Let's see how good the dust filters are doing. It is humid as all heck, so everything's still slippery. Oh, what the heck? I can't get my fingers dry whatsoever. I'm gonna have to use a screwdriver to... The endless humidity needs to stop. I know it's summertime and Connecticut's less than an hour from the ocean, but I'm just sick and tired of seeing the barometer at 3 o'clock. So anyways, not too much on there. I do have one of the stock fans still in there because I came up short by a single Venturi fan. I don't know if I have a third Venturi still out there somewhere that I gotta dig out, or if I just plain didn't buy enough. But after the cleanup that's going to take place after I rehab Tuxedo, I will have my answer. Yes, I'm bringing Tuxedo back, because one of the key design decisions of Monolith here is that I want this machine to do exactly what I want it to do, and that's it. I had a problem towards the end of Tuxedo's life cycle, so to speak, where it was becoming like a server, where there was stuff that never saw, where there were drives and other stuff that never actually saw any action. So, there was parts that were sitting in the machine using power that I wasn't using on a regular basis. So, that's one of the reasons why the smaller... this dust filter doesn't have anything yet either. Come on, I just built the thing a couple days ago. Let me give it a chance here. But you'd think with the dust sucker case that something would have gotten into this thing by now. We'll give it some time, a couple of weeks or a month, but this isn't a very dusty house to begin with, so... Anyways... So Tuxedo became too much like a server. There were drives in it like the SSD backup and the extra drive that I never actually used except to back things up. The rest of the time they drew power and did absolutely nothing. And Tuxedo had a disadvantage when it came to power efficiency versus this. So we know that this can get down into the 30s wattage-wise. But I actually turned on some more power-saving features on the motherboard with the PCI Express controller and the AMT type stuff, the Intel Advanced something. Been learning more about some of the new shiny new features, and I also got Windows 10 working with UEFI by reformatting the main SSD as GPT instead of MBR. So I'm experimenting with a lot of new technologies that my old system didn't have. And of course that Modge vent thing on the side right there could be used for a side fan, but I don't anticipate side fans ever being useful ever again. It is a little bit of cognitive dissonance though that Monolith with a Define R5 instead of what should have been a Define XL R3 that doesn't exist yet, it's actually shorter than Tuxedo. So it's a bit weird to see the space now that is by my desk for a computer that is significantly more efficient and significantly more powerful. This door hinge I think is reversible too if I ever need it to go the other way. So yeah, it's looking like a nice machine. It's probably going to last me quite some time, barring anything like a natural disaster or something. And I hope that, much like Tuxedo's case, that this R5 can be used for multiple builds. As Tuxedo, that case actually is from the late 2000s. It originally housed the Core 2 Duo system that's now in the Silver Bullet. Anyways, to tie up the loose ends from yesterday, last video actually, it was a couple days ago now. What happened was I kind of disappeared for a while because it was like the turd Shiba all over again. When I first got the turd Shiba, I reformatted it, flipped between Windows 8 and Windows 10, and I did all kinds of configuring. I probably didn't actually start to enjoy and use the system until like a week or so after I got it. And if Toshiba was monitoring how often people reinstalled Windows, they probably thought I was an idiot that didn't know how to use a computer. So I must have reinstalled Windows more times in the first 2 weeks of the turd Shiba than, well, some computers' lifetimes that I've had. Let's tie up the remaining loose ends with Monolith and put it where it belongs. We'll do another power test too, to see if the PCI Express helps things any. Front side with the board contains some unavoidable obstructions, but the airflow is better than its predecessor. Look at all that space between the power supply and the Asus card. Of course, I don't have an ATX board in here that takes 2 graphics cards, so whatever. I don't know if I'd have the room for it. The motherboard maybe would have the second graphics card around. Anyways. So, yeah, right. So I do have some room to expand. I'm tempted to get another set of G-Skills, just cap this thing at 32 gigs, just to fill up all the RAM slots. The Cooler Master's working out okay, with no push-pull, but then again, look how close it is to the exhaust fan. Wouldn't that just be redundant if I ever went push-pull with the processor this close to a big Venturi blowing out the back? It's working in this case has presented a bit of a challenge though, simply because of how dark everything is. I have had to bust out the flashlight. So basically what I'm doing is I'm using this is a non-modular power supply with a couple of gears on it, so I'm using the extra drive base to stash the remaining spaghetti. The thing is, in this part of the case specifically, the airflow doesn't matter. There's nothing into the power supply. That's taking air in directly from underneath it, and all the important stuff is up here, where things can blow across the drives to the processor and out. So the airflow down here, what's coming in from that fan right there is not important compared to a little higher up, and it's not very obstructed in that respect. Although I could flip some drives around if I really wanted to, but there's going to be a third drive eventually right here when I can get the extra drive hooked up so I can have my data array back in action. But as it is, I want array, 2 drives, plus the games drive once. That's 3 drives grand total. And that'll be it, really. This machine doesn't need any more. It also only needs 1 optical drive, because I don't really do much with optical drives anymore. Tuxedo, I want to have 4 optical drives in. Get some cheapos or some junk machines, hook all their drives back up inside Tuxedo. So if I ever by chance want to redigitize my CD collection, iTunes can do that practically on autopilot with 4 drives and just spit out the trays as everything gets done. One of the things I want to do with Tuxedo is have it available for stuff that only happens once in a while, like redigitizing the CD collection and things like that. But as you can see, we don't have a pinch point by the graphics card anymore. The spaghetti very much stays where it is, and it is what it is. We just need a super low profile 90-degree SATA cable to get that last port up and running to hook the extra drive up. But micro ATX is working out a-okay. I also have room to plug in a sound card right there if I really wanted to, but I think the HDMI audio that comes with the NVIDIA cards these days is going to be more than good enough. Yeah, especially going to an AV receiver, so you don't need too many special effects on the audio, and of course HDMI does uncompressed 5.1 PCM versus the Toslink based sound cards out there still compressing it through DTS or Dolby Digital Live. Okay, so the cable management is working really well, even though there's a little bit of spaghetti still visible from this side. On the other side, however, much better. I'm actually using the cable ties now, and it kind of reminds me of the data highway in a server room. The backplate, of course, for the third-party cooling is the reverse with Intel. If this was AMD, this piece would be down and the other stuff would be up in the air, I think. So anyways, 2 SSDs, main, and actually the MX100 is the main. Everything's kind of coming through there. The big thing I do with the SATA cables to keep them from getting loose is jam them against the bottom of the case. So gravity from moving the case won't make them fall out. Unfortunately, we see a deficiency of the power supply in how these cables are. If we look here, and we look here, and we especially look at the mechanical drives, how they come up like that, and they go up and around, and then up like this. That's because this drive, the power supply has a couple of years on it. It's designed for the old style ATX cases with the power supply on the top. So unless you put your drives in upside down, which I didn't feel like doing, you're going to have some weird stuff with the wiring because these cables with multiple SATA plugs on them are biased towards coming down from the top as opposed to coming up from the bottom. Regardless, though, I immediately knew I had done something a lot better. There's also points for cable ties, for additional cable ties that I could use to clean things up even more. But for the most part, the nooks and crannies of the case have done that job spectacularly. Plus, there's no real airflow back here to obstruct. But that's basically the thing. I knew that I had done a good job when I went to close the cover on this, and it was way easier to close than the previous time. Isn't it great when you actually have your wiring somewhat nice and stuff isn't coming unplugged just from moving the case? One last thing before we call it with all of this Monolith stuff and get back to the next steps with Tuxedo. Yes, there are going to be next steps, as I've hinted at before. There are undoubtedly going to be internet trolls and other assorted people out there who pester the hell out of me for picking up an i7 Skylake 6700K and then matching it up with a B-series chipset motherboard that's not overclockable. They're gonna call me a moron, an idiot, that I don't know what I'm doing with computers, blah 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 blah. And just like all of those people out there who flap their mouths about YouTubers, they're not gonna have the whole story. I did a black and white update about this earlier. With YouTubing and YouTubers, there is always a rest of the story. So don't flap your mouth about just anybody because you don't know the rest of the story. You don't see what happens when the cameras are turned off. So this is a perfect example of that. So on the surface, it looks like I've been a moron with this 6700K and a non-overclocking motherboard. But look at this. You see that? 4 gigahertz. The non-K 6700 is 3.4 and it turbos up to 4. The K-series processor is 4 out of the box and turbos up to 4.2. Not a very exciting turbo. Matter of fact, it's the least exciting turbo I've ever seen. Ooh, 200 megahertz. But you know what this means. This means that when you buy a K-series i7 and put it in a non-overclocking motherboard, essentially what you've done is you've paid Intel to overclock your processor for you. How many of you actually have ever thought of it that way? No, seriously. 3.4 to 4 base instead of 4 turbo. Stop and think about it. Do you really think that is the 6700K that significantly different from the 6700 non-K to justify a 600 megahertz, 15% frequency difference at base speeds? Now consider when this is all happening. August. Back to school season in the stores. The second most popular time of the year when it comes to electronic sales volume. So second only to Black Friday in terms of electronic sales and getting good prices on electronics. Newegg has back to school and back to college going on right now. I was ready to get a non-K 6700 because of the TDP being only 65 watts. But guess what the price difference was between the 6700 and the 6700K? $20. $20. The regular was $300. The K was $320. Essentially, rather than being a moron and gimping myself with overclocking, especially when the Windows 10 license I picked up for this machine is a retail license and can actually leave the motherboard if I upgrade the motherboard later. Forgot that detail, didn't you? Besides that little inconvenient truth, I've essentially paid Intel $20 to overclock my processor as far as I'm concerned. Think about it. And this is an officially supported speed. Now you consider all the flakiness and the instability that I ran into with the last system when I was playing around with overclocking, wondering if I'd done any damage, at least before I found out about the Windows Anniversary update that screwed up things here and there. But also consider this. Here's what that $20 has bought me. I have the processor set to 85% maximum speed, in the same vein as that you don't need a powerful processor to game thing I did earlier. Let's run NovaBench with the processor capped at 85%, therefore speed limited to 3.4 GHz, remembering that the results are usually CPU 900, GPU 1200. Oh, I'm a moron for putting a K-series processor in a non-overclocking motherboard because I didn't want to spend more money than necessary to replace my almost... I didn't know if Tuxedo was on its last legs or not. It sure looked it though, so I didn't want to take any risks. I was very risk averse. Did what I could to get the system, to get a new upgrade path going with a more modern case, and look at the numbers. They're already significantly lower. Just with a 15% drop, 2700, high 2s instead of mid 3s. Because we're 3.4 gigahertz max instead of 4 on multi-core anyways. And the score is 2107 instead of 2400. The CPU is in the 800 instead of the 900s, and the graphics results have gone down too. This is what that $20 bought me. I could theoretically upgrade the motherboard, and the license I have for Windows 10 will let me do that if I want to upgrade in a couple of years. But for now, I think I've about had enough of overclocking. Plus, with such a notable speed and performance difference here when the thing's running full blast, plus I've seen some measurements from some people that hooked up watt meters, and the TDP difference goes away when you're running games full blast between the 6700 and the 6700K. I paid Intel $20 to overclock my system for me. I wasn't a moron. I just capitalized on an opportunity. That's enough Monolith stuff for now. Thank you very much. It'll be very interesting to see what pops up in the comments in the next couple of days. The next question. Yeah, don't we wish. The next 1000%. Yeah, you can't go above 100, by the way, for those who don't have Windows 10 and don't know how this works. So, that is that with that. That is Monolith, the new system. That's the results of everything. Next question. What to do about Tuxedo? This is MultimediaJay, signing off. Thanks for stopping by.